In this session, we're going to actually dive into coding, and in order to do so, I hope you were able to install IntelliJ from the last video. Now what you need to do is open IntelliJ and then go File, New Project. And once you come into this new project window, you want to make sure on the left panel you choose Java. And then over here at the top, you should have Project SDK, and you should have some sort of JDK version here. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine. Hopefully from the instruction video you were able to get that. If not, if you don't have anything here, it should be here in the list. If not, you can just click on download JDK and you should get one. IntelliJ should help you get one. So the next step is just clicking next. And then over here you want to click on create project from template, then create and choose the command line app. This just gives you some extra code that we're going to use. So click next, and then you can give your project a name. I'm just going to call it functions. You can name it whatever you want. This is where the project is going to be located for you, and you can ignore the package for now. Just let it be whatever is there. Okay, great. Now we're in IntelliJ, and you can see some code here on this in this main screen right here, and then you have some folders on the left panel. So let's explore what we have here. So this screen over here is where you actually write your code. This is called IntelliJ. It's called an IDE, Interactive Development Environment. I'm only telling you the name because it gets thrown out a lot. So IDE. And what it does is basically what Microsoft Words or Google Docs does whenever you're writing a paper or an essay. It basically helps you autocomplete stuff. It tells you if you've done something wrong, if you spelled something wrong, and it just makes it a lot more easier to write code. It does some other things as well, but mainly it does what I just basically said. And we'll see its other functions as we go along. On the left here, you see the folder structure. So this is our project, whatever you named it. I called it functions. You can open it up and you'll see a bunch of folders. You don't need to worry about that idea for now, and don't worry about the functions IML. What you really want to focus on is this source folder. That's why it's a different color. So when you open it, it basically has the file that you're working on right now, which is called main.java. Whenever you're programming, you usually have more than one file which you've programmed. Usually there's like thousands. That's why you have this folder structure. Don't need to worry about it, but this is why we have it here, so you can create more and more folders and organize all the files that you write. So now let's jump into the right side. I do want to give you a word of caution as we go forward. There's going to be some concepts, some pieces of code that I will show you that we're not going to be able to explain and understand at the moment. So I'm going to skip these and I'll tell you, I'm going to explain these later. And the main reason is knowing it now will just confuse you. So for some concepts, I'm just going to say ignore it and just write what I write, and then we'll get into why later. So over here we have the package. Again, this is something which is mainly used for organization purposes, so don't worry about it for now. Then we have public class main. We haven't really talked about classes yet, so again, just please ignore it. Line 3 and line 8, and you can see the line number here. And we're going to jump right over here between line 5 and 7. We have a function here. Again, we haven't talked about public, static, and void, these three. So for now, we're not going to focus on them too much, but we'll cover them later. And then we have main. This is a function. It's called the main function. So this is the name of the function. As we learned from before, this is the inputs of the function. We don't know what this means here, but that's okay. But it's a type string. The name of the input is args. So what is the main function? This is something I had trouble when I started programming. So the way to think about it is through an example. So let's say you're actually making a movie. So you go ahead, you hire a bunch of actors, you hire a director, some writers, some cameramen, and all of that. But none of this will matter unless you actually choose a scene and have your actors go over there and act the main scene out, right? So they need to go in front of the camera, and the cameraman need to take a shot, and then they need to act it out. So before they go onto the main scene and act it out, nothing will really matter. Nothing will come to life. The same is true with programming. You can write all the functions in the world, but unless you actually place them in the main function, none of it will actually come to life. So whatever function, whatever code that we write, if we want to use that code, we need to add it into the main function. So with that being clear, let me show you case. Let us write our first program. So the first function that I'm going to write is a function that is given to us by Java. So you can think of a lot of other functions being in Java that are like tools. So like if you want to build a table, you use a bunch of tools, screwdrivers, nails, etc., etc. So you buy them, you bring them all together, then you can use them to actually build the table. It's the same thing here with Java. There's a lot of external tools that you can use. And the tool that I want to use here is to be able to print stuff on our screen. So whenever we write functions, we can test them. And you can just memorize this or just copy me. So it's system.out.println, and then I'm going to say open quotations and say hello. And then we're going to end it with a semicolon. So if you recall, we said whenever we want to write words, we put in between quotation marks, right? So what this function will do is this function right here. What it will do is whatever you put it as an input, it will print it onto the screen. So the way we run our code is we either press this green icon here next to the function, or we can press the green icon right at the top, and you can see IntelliJ shows you the keyboard shortcut for it. So we can just click on it, and you can see over here that it says hello. The line above just tells you that it's using the JDK located at wherever it is, but this is what's important. It says hello. If I say hello, how are you? If I type hello, how are you in the function, it will just print this over here when I run the program. So there we have it. We have written our first program. It's a pretty boring program, but it's a good start. So let's move on to the next one. So the next function we're going to write is right here in gray. And what this is, when you add two slashes in front, basically it means it tells IntelliJ that ignore this. This is not code. So whenever you put two slashes in front of something, it tells IntelliJ to ignore it. So if I say, hi, how are you? This isn't code, right? This is English. And IntelliJ is like, oh, everything is wrong. It's red, right? If I put two slashes, then it'll ignore it. So we want to write a function. And for this function, you can just watch what I do. And for the next one, go ahead and pause it and try to do it yourself. So for this function, we're going to try to calculate the total cost of bags, which we went over in our previous videos. And for the input, we want to take the number of bags the customer wants and the cost of each bag. Okay, so that's the input, and the output's going to be the total that the customer owes us. All right, so if you remember the formula for functions, first we put the type of the output. Since it's a decimal number, we're going to have a float. Then we're going to give the function a name. So we're going to say give it a good descriptive name. Calculate total bag cost. And the reason it's important to give descriptive names is when other developers or when you yourself read your own code, you can make sense of what you wrote. So we're taking two inputs, right? One of them is number of bags. Number of bags is a whole number. So we're going to say int number of bags and give it a name, number, and remember camel case. So the first letter of every new word will be in capital. So int number of bags. And the second input is going to be cost of each bag, which is a decimal. So it's going to be float, and I'm going to call it bag cost. Now we said when you finish putting in the inputs, you open bracer, and IntelliJ will automatically create a closing one for you because it is smart. We press enter here, and now we write our code. So this is our first time actually writing code. And the way we calculate the total bag cost, so when you go to Target, when you get 3 bags and each one is 25 cents, you know in your head that you need to add 25 cents 3 times or multiply it by 3, right? So I'm going to create a variable, call it total cost of bags, total bag cost. and it's going to be equal. What is it going to hold? It's going to hold the number of bags multiplied by the bag cost. And the mistake I made here, this is good because we can see this. So right here, IntelliJ is giving us, putting a red line under this whole statement, just like in Word, you would get a red line if you spelled something wrong. So what it's telling me, if you look over here in the error message, it's telling me that the required type is int, but then it's a float. The result is actually a float. So I'm saying the total back cost is a whole number, but then I'm multiplying a decimal number by a whole number, which will be a decimal number. So that's why this is in red. So whenever you multiply like 25 cents by 3, the answer is 75 cents. So it's not a whole number, and that's why IntelliJ is saying this is wrong. So the answer should be a float. And then once I have that result, I need to return it, because that's how we said we give outputs in a function. So we're just going to return total back cost. Just like that. Now, floats, if you recall, dollars are only 2 decimal places. Floats in Java are more than 2 decimal places. I'll go over what actual type we use for money later on, but for now, just ignore the extra decimal places. One last thing we need to do, and this part again is one of those things that you need to ignore for now. So you just need to add public static in front of the float, okay, in the function. We'll explain why later. So now we come into the main function. We need to call our function in the main function so it actually activates. So we say calculate total back cost. And we can put any number here, right? So let's try our original example. 3 bags. Let's say the customer wants 3 bags and each bag costs 25 cents. And whenever you write a float in Java, you need to put a f in front of it. Okay, so 25f, it tells Java that this is a float. So now when I run our application, we should see 0.75, and we'll ignore the rest of the decimals. And there we go, 0.75, which is great, which means whatever we did, we did right. So let's say the price increased to 30 cents because of inflation. So now if we run our application, it should become 0.9. And we're going to ignore, as I said, ignore the rest of these numbers for now. So 0.90, which is great. We can buy 5 bags, so we should get 1.50. And there we go. So this is our first function. It calculates the price of however many bags that we bought, and it works. So now let's move to the next one. So this next example we're going to calculate tax. So what we're going to do is we're going to take as input the total owed to us by the customer, and then measure how much tax would need to be added onto it. Okay, so let's see if you can give it a go. Pause it and give it a try. Okay, so hopefully you've either done it or struggled with it a little bit. So first we just put public static, and we're going to explain why we do that later. Now, what is the type of the output here? It's the tax amount, right? So it's going to be a decimal number, so we're going to say float. Now let's give it a good name. So calculate tax amount. Now what's the input here? It's just one input this time. It's the total owed to us by a customer. So this one is also a decimal number. So we're going to say float total. And then we're going to press enter, open bracers, close bracer. And now what we're going to do is we're going to decide a tax amount. So we're going to say integer tax percentage. Let's say it's pretty high. It's 30%. Okay, so 0.3. And again, I made a mistake of calling it an integer. It should be a float because it's a decimal number, and I need the f. Okay, so that's the amount of tax. So now we need to have an integer, which again a mistake. It's a float. So tax amount, and the way we calculate it, so let's say you have you owe $100. If you have 30% tax, that should be $30, right? So we just need to multiply the total by tax percentage. So tax amount equals total times tax percentage, and then you can return the tax amount, which is the answer we're looking for. Okay, so now let's try it out. So instead of, before we were calling the calculate total back cost, we're going to remove this. And inside this print function, we're going to say calculate tax amount of 100. Right? So if we pay $100, we should get $30 tax. There we go. And again, you can ignore anything past the second decimal. And you can keep you can keep changing the numbers, and you should get the right answer. So if you make it 200, you should get 60. And there you go. So now you have a function which calculates tax, and you have a function which calculates the number of how much you need to pay for the number of bags you're getting. So we're getting close to actually writing some code that represents the self-checkout at Target. So for the last function here, let's try to write a function which calculates the sum of prices of 3 products. So let's say we have an apocalypse of some sorts, and Target says you are only allowed to buy 3 things. So the customer, the self-checkout only needs to be able to handle 3 items. So what the function should take the price of item 1, the price of item 2, and the price of item 3, and then it should output the total owed to us by the customer. All right, so give it a crack, pause, and then you can continue. All right, so again, we're going to add public static like before. Now we're going to say, what is the type? Again, it's going to be a float, because it's going to be the total owed to us, and that's the decimal number. And we're going to say, we're going to call it calculate total. And for input, we have 3 inputs. We have item 1, item 2, and item 3. And since they're all prices and they can be 2 decimal places, we're going to make them floats. So we're going to say float item 1, float item 2, and float item 3. And you don't need to call them item 1, item 2, item 3, whatever you think is a better name. And I'm going to come down, I'm going to open bracer, close bracer, and now let's write the code. So what do we need to do? Let's have a variable called it's going to be not an int. It's going to be a float, because the total is going to be a decimal number. I'm going to call it total. And now I'm just going to add the 3 item prices, right? Item 1 plus item 2 plus item 3. So this is like when you're scanning the items in the self-checkout. So we're just going to do item 1 plus item 2 plus item 3. And then we're just going to return the total. All right, so that's pretty much it. So let's go and test it out. So we don't need to calculate tax anymore. So let's do calculate total. And let's do 1F. And remember, we put F just because it's a float. 2F and 3F. So $1.00, $2.00, and $3.00. So this should be 6. So let's run it. And there you have it, 6. And you can make it as complicated as you want, right? So $1.99, $2.50, and $3.99. And you get it. There you go. You have the customer needs $8.48. Okay, so this would be the end. I just want to show you something really cool as well. So in the main function, so whenever you go to Target, right, you first add up all the products that you bought. Then it adds on the number of bags that you bought, so the price of the number of bags that you bought, and then it adds the tax on top of it. And what you see at the end is the sum of all those things, right? We can actually do that now. Now that you wrote 3 different separate functions to do all those things, we can use them as tools to calculate what we want. So let's give it a go. So we're going to write float total total item prices. Let me give it a different name. Item sums. Items sum. So we're going to say calculate total. First, we calculate the price of the 3 products that we bought. So let's say one of them was $1, the other one was $2, and the other one was $3. Okay, so now let's say for some reason we need 2 bags for the items that we bought. So let's put bag cost equals calculate total bag cost, and we're going to buy 2 bags and each one of them costs 30 cents, and let's not forget the F. Okay, and then we want to calculate how much tax we owe. So what do we need to, what's the total? So let's write the calculate tax. So what's the total that we owe them? Is going to be the item sum plus the bag cost, right? So whatever we needed to pay for the items plus whatever we needed to pay for the bags. Now, if we add all these 3 up, we get the total amount that we need to pay. So item sum plus bag cost plus tax amount. Now if we run this, so this is the cool part, right? We bought 3 items, $1, $2, $3. We took 2 bags. Now we'll get the answer of how much we actually owe Target with the tax included. So $8.58 would be how much we owe them. That's pretty neat, right? You basically wrote what you see on the Target self-checkout. So the total of the items plus the cost of bags plus the amount of tax, and you get the total. You add all those 3 up together and you get what you actually owe Target. And this is why programming is so great. I just wanted to give you a taste. That's why the self-checkouts are so convenient, because the computer can do this so much faster. And you just basically wrote it on your machine. So I hope you enjoyed this. In the next video, we'll talk a little bit more about classes, and then we're going to try to write some more complicated functions and do some cooler things. Thanks for watching.